Being on the set of a multi-million-dollar production, you need to be tactful, you need to be very professional. I know how Japanese people are, how methodical and militaristic they are in their execution of plans. At any given moment, if you just paused in time, it might look like there's a lot of people not really doing a lot, but everyone's aware of everybody else and the flow. Especially with YouTubers, it's like they've got a personality for their channel, right? There's a visual style. Instead of just shooting it in my style, shoot it in their style.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today we welcome Julian, creative director of Future Collective, videographer here in Japan. You've worked with BBC, you worked with Netflix, and you do a lot of freelance work for some of Japan's most famous content creators. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
Looking forward to diving into the behind the scenes of basically video production here in Japan. And as usual, before I want to kind of know where your Japan story started back in Birmingham.
Back in Birmingham, the grey land of Birmingham. So, I mean, when I lived in Birmingham, where I was born in Birmingham, but I lived there till I was about 18, and then I moved to Brighton. So, if anyone knows England very well,
the sunny side of England.
There you go. Exactly. It's the kind of the playtown for rich Londoners, people call it. But Brighton's a very lovely town. But basically, from the age of 18, I lived there until the age of 27, and then I moved to Japan. But growing up, I didn't really have much exposure to Japan or anything like that, except for video games. I had a huge love. I still do, a huge love for especially Nintendo games. So I guess that was really how I first experienced any kind of form of Japanese culture. And then things, you know, like when I was a kid in the late 90s, anime was becoming more popular, and it was being, you know, imported into Europe and stuff like that. I think America got it quite a lot earlier, via like Hawaii and that kind of connection, maybe in the 80s. But you know, when I was a kid, every Saturday morning they'd have like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, not Z, Z. So those kind of things. But you know, they're all dubbed in English, so I hadn't even really heard the Japanese language until again I was much older, and I didn't really even realize that Pokemon, for example, was Japanese. I just thought it was a cartoon because I was a kid and I had no concept. But the first thing that I really came across that resonated with me was a game. In English, the name is Mystical Ninja, Goemon, Mystical Ninja. And it's an N64 game where you play as a kind of a fantastical alternate version of a real person from history, a Goemon, who was this famous, like, kind of almost like the Robin Hood of Japan. He was like a bandit, and he used to steal from like the shogun and, you know, give to the poor and stuff. And he met a very gruesome demise. He was boiled alive for his crimes back in the Sengoku period. But in this game, you play as this character called Goemon with big blue spiky hair, and it's set in the Edo period, and it's really wacky, and it's a bit like I don't know. It's got like this like kind of like old kind of Japanese like kabuki kind of humor and stuff like that, and the music's very like
koto music a little bit.
It uses koto, yeah. It's very traditional sounding, but it's all mixed with kind of like synth and like kind of almost like enka kind of style and all this kind of stuff. And playing that game, the thing that really resonated with me the most was the music. So I just fell in love with the music. And then when I got a little bit older, I searched, like, you know, what are these instruments? They're all obviously like MIDI because this is the N64, so there was no like recordings of, you know, real instruments like you have in modern games. But even then, that very kind of like twangy shamisen sound, or, you know, the plucky like harp sound of a koto, and the shakuhachi, like the flute, it's got a very shrill sound. It sounds very different to any other kind of wind instrument. So that's kind of how I first got a taste of any kind of Japanese culture, really. And then it just kind of grew. I guess it just carried on in that way for a long time. I actually studied music at university. I studied music performance in guitar. And basically... sorry.
When was the first time then you started thinking of maybe I can go to Japan and see what it's like?
Yeah, so the first time it was... I mean, I wanted to come for a very long time since I was a kid, but the first time I was actually able to come, I was 26. And I came with my brother at the time, just the two of us. And we just came for a vacation. I just thought, like, it was something I'd always wanted to do. He's also a bit of a nerd. So, you know, we wanted to do all the usual, like, Akihabara and go to like the Pokemon store and all the geeky stuff, right?
The first time you come to Japan, and if you have that kind of
Yeah.
background interest into the country, you usually go to those.
Yeah, we just did like the usual experience, and that was it really. We were here for 2 weeks. We also went to like Mount Fuji. We rented a car and we drove around for a bit and had that experience. And we met some really cool local people here, a few of which I'm actually still friends with to this day. So that was really great. But when I got home, or I'd say probably just before we go, going to the airport, we were just like, man, Japan's like great. It's probably what most people's first reactions are, And I remember having this thought of like, I really wish I could have spoke Japanese to some level. I didn't know any words at all, except for like sushi and Godzilla or whatever, the usual things. But I really thought like maybe next time I come, I'm going to try and learn some of the language before I come back. So I got home on the way home, actually on the flight. I downloaded this app called Dr. Moku, and it's just like to learn like katakana and hiragana. It's just like a flashcard app. And by the time I'd landed in England, I pretty much could memorize all
12
of
hours
these.
later.
pretty much, yeah. So like I started doing that. Then I signed up. I don't know if you know Wanikani. It's like the kanji studying tool, and I got really obsessed with that because that's kind of like a gamified system as well. You get points and levels and stuff. So I got really kind of like obsessed with that. And then I completed Wanikani. So I was like, I know all the kanji now. Then I'll try and like learn some other language or whatever. And then all this time this was happening, just very coincidentally, I met my wife, who's Japanese. She's from Fukuoka, but she was living in London at the time, which is, as you know, it's not very far from Brighton. So we met on a dating app, and we kind of bonded pretty quickly just about our shared interest in. Oh, obviously she's Japanese, but I had an interest in Japan, So, but there was something we could kind of talk about immediately. But then, we just connected on all these other levels. So it was still at that point, there was no thought in my mind of like, oh, am I going to live in Japan or something like that? We were just doing the whole thing. But then, it just kind of got to the point where her visa was coming to an end, and we had to make a decision. It was like, we either do something and extend your visa here, or I come and try and live in Japan for a bit and see how it works. Again, none of this was fueled by any kind of like previous experience I had about Japan. It was all literally just based around our relationship and just how do we maintain and continue it somewhere. So we decided, okay, let's go to Japan, do it for a year or two, and then if it's cool, then it's cool. If it's not, we'll come back, because she really likes the UK as well. And we had no future plan further than like a year ahead. So that was pretty much it. Yeah, we just moved here, and I've been here ever since.
What was it like then when you came back and you had to, okay, well, now I'm not just here to travel around Akihabara. I need to work. I need to kind of find a place. And was this a difficult transition for you?
I mean, actually, I always feel bad saying this because, like, compared to most people, like, not at all. And I say that in a couple of ways. Is one, I feel very lucky to have a lot of support from my wife. It's not like I made her do a lot of stuff for me, but I just knew that, like, if anything ever went wrong, which thankfully it didn't, I just knew that she would always be there to support me. So that just gave me confidence. And then the other thing, I guess, was like I did a fair amount of prep work, so I felt like I didn't just come in and go into it blind. My work history is a bit all over the place. I'll keep it very short, but basically before I moved here, I was working as an electronic design engineer, doing things like 3D modeling and circuit board design and all this kind of stuff. And the company I was working for in Brighton, they were actually, in the 80s, they were bought out by a Japanese company from Osaka. So I don't know if their head office is somewhere around here, but they're called Hoshiden. Okay. And their Honsha is in Osaka. And before I moved, I spoke to my boss, told her what was happening and stuff. And she was sad to see me go, but she understood, it's a big life decision. So she was like, all the best. And I asked her, would you mind writing me a letter of recommendation or sending somebody an email or something, because I don't have any work. But she just looked me dead in the eyes, and she was like, you don't want to do that. And I was like, what do you mean? And because she's a woman, I can't remember how old she was, but she was in her 50s perhaps. So she was a very professional, career-driven woman, very strong, very nice person. But she would have to go twice a year to the head office in Osaka for the board meetings, right? And she was the company director of my company. And she said that whenever she was there, she basically got treated like a tea lady.
So still very, very, very old-fashioned.
Yeah. Which I know, a lot of things are changing in Japan, but from her experience, she was she didn't appreciate that at all, as you can imagine. But she said that other aspects of the company for the just, you know, the regular employees like me, you know, you would be expected to turn up at like crazy early in the morning, do the radio taiso, you know, you can't go home until the manager leaves or whatever, all this kind of stuff. And she just said like, you will hate it. Like, I know you will hate it. And I was like, I hear you loud and clear. Like, that was basically the last I thought of it. I was like, I guess I'm changing jobs, you know, because I assumed that any other job like that in Japan or any other engineering job, because the way it is in the UK, we tend to be very relaxed in our approach to work. You know, we're very professional, but, you know, we stop every hour for a cup of tea and, you know, we're always chatting and it's very friendly. But engineering as an industry, it's very, you know, like everything has to be recorded properly and certificates for everything. And it's very detailed, you know, so I thought...
So you studied music in university, then you worked as an engineer.
Yes.
And now you're a professional video producer.
Yes.
So when did the video part kind of come into play there?
So basically I've always had an interest in video, going all the way back to like when I got my first like Intel Celeron 400 hertz like PC back when I was like 8 years old. You know, I had one of the first ever webcams, you know, my dad bought me this PC.
Like the 4-pixel kind of...
Exactly, yeah. You know, my dad bought like the family PC and he was like, you know, this is only for schoolwork. And of course, like literally 3 hours later, we had like Grand Theft Auto 1 installed on it and it ran at like 6 frames a second. But, you know, I really got into computers from an early age, just all the different things you could do on there. But me and my friends used to have great fun just making goofy videos with Windows Movie Maker, like the built-in app at the time. And it was very, very rudimentary. You could just like record and cut, and maybe it had some like transitions, but it was basically like that was all you could do with it. But we would just like film little comedy skits in my like kind of kitchen dining room area, and basically the limitation of what we could shoot was basically the 1 meter cable of the webcam, because it had to stay connected to the
couldn't move it.
Yeah,
no
so
Bluetooth yet.
Exactly, yeah. So thankfully the computer was on like a desk with wheels, so we could like wheel it around a little bit. We'd like make little sets and like it was really, really stupid. And it's one of those things I really wish I had somehow still had access to all that data. I would love to see those videos again. But just that experience of creating things, you know, with people who were my friends and just, you know, just bouncing ideas off each other. And, you know, at the age of 8, the ideas were very ridiculous. But I feel like that pursuit of creativity and freedom never really left me, honestly. Of course, the way you think becomes more refined and more mature, whatever that means. But that sense of just like, I want to just do something for the sake of it, and then maybe think about the results afterwards, you know.
So when the time came to reconsider your career in engineering, was you moved to Japan, it was like, oh, why don't I pick up a camera again?
Almost. So it's all a bit over the place, but because I am qualified in music performance and technically music education, I actually, when I moved here, I was teaching guitar in a music school for 2 years. I found that job just through Google. Before I moved, I found a school, sent them an email, told them my situation, and said, like, you know, these are my qualifications. One of my modules as part of my degree was education. So I am technically, you know, like officially qualified to do that. And I reached out, and they were like, yeah, sure, no problem. We can't give you like a full-time job because with it's not like a school. It's more like a private school with like, you know, one-on-one lessons. So they were like, we can't just give you 40 students for a full schedule. So we'll start you out just like on a Saturday or a Sunday. And then as we get more students, you know, we'll build up your schedule. And eventually a couple of other teachers left quite close to each other. So I just kind of absorbed a lot of their students and then became full-time. But then on the side of doing all that, I was just constantly pursuing my passion of videography and photography. And I think when I came to Japan, I think just the surroundings of Japan and just all the new sites and all the things, it just kind of sparked something in me. I really wanted to just go out with my camera a lot and just film things, because just the general aesthetic here is so cool, right? Especially to people that are not from Japan. There was just so many things that I wanted to see, so many places that I'd seen via other creators or just online, places I wanted to go and check out, and I always just took my camera with me. I started a little YouTube channel, which I've long since abandoned, but, you know, I was just making like little travel vlogs and stuff like that. But that YouTube channel, I guess, really is what led to me being able to become a professional, in the sense that, like, one of the videos I made, I sent to a potential client, as like a like a portfolio piece basically. And I just emailed them and said like, I'm looking for work at the moment, and they replied to me and said, actually the timing is quite good because we've got a project coming up and we're looking for a videographer to work with on this project. That client at the time was Gaijin Pot, so they're a big like media outlet. And
yeah, we had them on the podcast as well.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah, so job search engine, all the other stuff, The job actually was a joint collaboration between the central Japan governments, the four prefectures of Aichi, Mie, Gifu, and Nagano, and basically it was just like going to each of the prefectures with one of the writers, and then I would like film the writer. They were like the presenter of the video, and they were also writing the article for each thing, and then I was making like the companion video. But yeah, you kind of in that very just kind of like spontaneous thing where I thought like I'm going to try and do something. I kind of just like pitched an idea, got the job, completed the job, and then I believe ended up with a very satisfied customer at the end of it.
So that was kind of your first professional gig.
Literally, yeah. No, that was the first thing I got paid for, and then right at the end of that, I was like, it was difficult because not the job was difficult, but I was actually still working full time in my other job at the time, so it was very stressful. Just I had to like somehow I managed to get the time off work to go on these trips to these prefectures, and then in the evening I was basically working till because the school I was working at, a lot of the students were adults, so it was open till like 10 in the evening because a lot of people would come after work.
After work, yeah.
So I was getting home like 11, just eating dinner, and then just like editing these videos until like 3 or 4 in the morning. So that was kind of stressful, but I'm really glad that I pushed through that because it just in a very short amount of time, I just experienced every single step of generally the experience of making videos in Japan in a very short time. Of course, it's more nuanced than that, but I feel quite lucky in that way. Just for the timing, of I guess when I don't know what inspired me to make that push at that time,
but since that first push, you worked with companies like Netflix or BBC Earth.
Yeah.
How was this transition?
I mean, that transition, that's been a slow, gradual thing. So since the Gaijin Pot job, I guess really what I started doing was more like YouTube stuff because it's a lot of smaller scale, it's smaller budgets, smaller expectations. Everything's smaller, But I always really pride myself in doing good work. So whatever I'm working on, I'll always just try and do the best version that I can. And I don't believe that I'm the best in the biz, by any stretch of the imagination. But I guess I can see it in the way that I've managed to progress. Is like the work that I've done has been good enough to capture the attention of people that, are potential clients and things like that. So basically just by working and doing lots of YouTube stuff and then other stuff on the side, just trying to branch out into as many industries as possible or as many genres, I guess, as possible. Just one by one, certain people will reach out to me or I'll reach out to them, and it's just network building basically. As to how these kind of jobs compare, again, it really just depends what the job is.
So I'm quite curious now. Let's take Netflix for example, because we had some previous guests on the podcast that worked in commercial production, that worked on Japanese TV production, but Netflix is this American giant production company and streaming service. So they have maybe a different approach to how they make shows and series and so on. Can you give us a little bit of a look behind the scenes of what's it like on a set of Netflix in Japan?
Yeah. So with the Netflix thing, that was actually there's another production company making basically producing the content for the BTS. But I've got a pretty good relationship with this company, so for this particular project, I think they wanted someone who was, just competent and capable of capturing the shot. So they brought me in as like a hired gun, because being on the set of a multi-million-dollar production, you need to be tactful. You need to be very professional, and there's a lot of things where you only get one chance to capture them and stuff like that. So I would like to think that that's kind of the reputation I've built up for myself. Is that just if you hire me, then I'll get it done to the best of my ability. So I was brought in to do that. But behind the scenes, yeah, I mean, it was very interesting to see. It was kind of surprising, but not surprising. I guess surprising in the way that I'd just never seen it with my eyes before, but not surprising in the way that I know how Japanese people are, how methodical and almost like militaristic they are in their execution of plans. So, the crew would roll in the morning, they'd set up and stuff, and there's like 200 people on set, There's the director, then the production crew, and there's like the set designers and the people doing the rigging and the lighting, and there's the catering and all this kind of stuff. But it's just like the synchronicity between all of the different sides of the production was really kind of remarkable to watch, you know, because my job there was really basically just to stay out of everybody's way, just like, you know, blend into the corner and just, you know, film the actors kind of like getting ready for their lines, or, you know, film the crew building the sets and stuff, and just capture that essence of the behind the scenes. But by just being the person that was there watching everything, I could at the same time kind of absorb, you know, but it was just kind of like, you know, when people getting ready for the set, they do one shot, and then it's, you know, like cut, people just run in, grab the camera, another person grabs the lens bag or whatever, and then like other people grab the lights, and then they just move everything around, and then the actors come out, and then all the, you know, the set designers come in or whatever, and it's just like so coordinated. Everybody seems to know what everyone else is doing, so people aren't like running into each other. Even though like one of the scenes that I filmed this year for another project, but unfortunately can't say the name of it at the moment, but it was shot in basically a very, not small, but it was shot inside a house, like a Japanese house in the countryside. And when there's like 50 people in the room, it's pretty small. But the way that everyone just moves in between each other, and just there was no accidents, there was no like collisions or like people knocking over tripods and stuff.
So everyone has like a very specific brief and a very specific role, and they have one task, and they got to do this one task perfectly.
Exactly, yeah. So at any given moment, if you just paused in time, it might look like there's a lot of people not really doing a lot, but they're all really focused on what the other people are doing. When those people are doing their thing, the people waiting, they're just waiting for their window to do what they need to do. So as soon as it's like ding, and then that person will stop, and this person will kind of move in, but everyone's aware of everybody else and the flow. I guess, you know, like everyone's got their overlapping timetable. So
do you get a sort of brief then to kind of tell you, okay, you need to film these and these and these things, and you need to stay out of everyone's way, you need to kind of be there? Yeah.
So the production company that I was working with, they get a creative brief, of course, and they have a kind of a vision of what they wanted to show in the behind the scenes stuff. So maybe it's like a story of like how the actors are. Maybe like on screen they're like enemies, but then behind the scenes they're friends and stuff like that. Or, you know, just certain themes that they want to show in the BTS, or perhaps a lot of this stuff that we're shooting is used for promotional material. So there's just a certain, maybe there's like a storyline in the actual show that they want to highlight during the promotional run, you know, so that these key moments are more specific, you know. So it's just about being able to capture that. So yeah, you get a brief of what is required in that regard, but because it is BTS, it's very fly on the wall. At the end of the day, what you capture is just like what you're able to capture. There's a timetable of all the shots that will be shot, but
so you, in your capacity there, you basically kind of work as a freelancer hired by the production company that is hired by Netflix, so to say, to film the behind the scenes of their own production. Yeah. Is this kind of the typical structure in Japan for larger production, that there's like multiple layers of companies involved, and at the end there's like some freelancers that are kind of coming in to film? Yeah,
I mean that's actually how it works everywhere. You know, there's just like if you just imagine like there's just a giant pot of money that is like Netflix, right? And they got the X amount of budget to do whatever. They'll hire one company to do something, and then this company will outsource, and this company will outsource, and this company will outsource. Like, there's a lot. I think sometimes it's a bit overly complicated, because I think what's happening is that the bigger companies, they want to keep more of the profit, so they'll outsource to freelancers, you know, and they'll charge them a cheaper rate, and then, you know, keep more of the profit. That's just basically how the business works. But sometimes there are a few too many cooks in the kitchen, so to say, or too many players on the field. But yeah, I've kind of got experience of both sides of that, being, you know, the production company side of it, or being the freelancer that's hired by the production company. It just depends, you know. So with that particular example of Netflix, it would be working via a production company that I already have a working relationship with, and kind of being on their roster, I guess you could call it, of capable cameramen.
So in that situation also, has the Wani Kani lessons, have they kind of been helpful? Is everything in Japanese and you need to communicate in Japanese, or is it more like an international kind of setting already, because the main company Netflix is foreign?
No, actually, I mean, both the Netflix productions that I've been on are completely Japanese cast and crew. I was the only foreigner in the room, basically, of like 200 people. So everybody's communicating in Japanese. So that was, I wouldn't say a difficult situation to navigate, but it's just an interesting one again, because a lot of things when you're learning a new language, things like the vocabulary and certain like grammatical patterns that get used in very particular situations, you know, so like on a film set when you've got like cut or something, or like rolling, or those kind of things, you know, in Japanese they have their own phrases and stuff, and just the things that people tend to say. But because, you know, they're doing multiple cuts every like hour, I'm kind of like learning, oh, that's what you say.
So what do they say for like cut in the Japanese?
Well,
kind of
cut is katto.
Katto, of course.
But like take one, like honban means like now is like so they do the dandori. Dandori is the planning stage and like the rehearsal, and then everyone shouts honban. That means like shut up, you know, we're about to like do it. Everybody get to your marks, basically. Moashitemasu, like rolling, you know. So that the tape is moashiteru. Those kind of things, you know. And there's lots, like any kind of profession, there's lots of very particular vocabulary. So, you know, when I first moved to Japan and worked in a school, for example, I learned a lot of music-related vocabulary, and then again, you know, video or, you know, content creation-related stuff as well.
So that's like the big production side of things. But on the other end of the spectrum, you also work directly, for example, with YouTubers, and you create some of their videos when they come to Japan, like Tom Scott or Chris Broad, who is in Japan, and you assist with some videos. When you have like 200 people on this one set, and then on the other end, I imagine you're like the one-man team to film and everything. How do these opportunities kind of, did they come to be for you?
I guess all opportunities, I believe, really come from like word of mouth, especially in this kind of creative industry. Because once you build a reputation for yourself as a person that is reliable and somebody that can, you know, achieve certain results to a certain standard or whatever, then people will want to work with you. That's just like the very short answer of it. But with the YouTubers in particular, I guess that it's just that I kind of connected with one of them originally, and then, you know, they're everyone's friends, right? So it's just a matter of, you know, doing a good job for one person, and then maybe one of their friends is in need of a cameraman, and they ask this person, and they say, oh, I know a guy. They gave him my number or whatever, and then there's two people I've worked with, and then it just kind of expands from there, basically, the web of connections. So whenever I'm again working on a video with a YouTuber, it doesn't really matter like how small of a job it is, you know. I always just treat it with the same mindset that it's like it's a job that somebody's paying me to do, and I'm just going to be as professional as possible, and always having the output in mind of like especially with the YouTubers, it's like they've got a personality for their channel, right? Or a particular branding, or there's a visual style, you know. So always paying attention to, like, instead of just shooting it in my style, shoot it in their style, you know. So if it's a new person I've never worked with before, I'll always watch a bunch of their videos beforehand and think like, oh, they use a load of these kinds of shots and stuff, like, which is like, you know, maybe I would never do that, but for this job, that's how I'm going to do it. So that when I send it to their editor, you know, because a lot of these guys have like full-time editors, the editor is then going to be like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, they know exactly what they're working with. Instead of getting a bunch of footage that's like, you know, I've captured the video, but it doesn't really fit the theme or the style that they do it in. So I always try and be really conscious of that. And I guess, that reputation is just,
YouTube is quite interesting now, because we see productions like Chris Broad or Tom Scott, like very big YouTubers. It's not anymore just you pick up a camera and you film yourself and you just shoot something. Some people still do and are successful at that, but nowadays it looks more like each of those videos is kind of fully produced, and there's a storyboard for the YouTube video and so on. Is it the same kind of level of, you have not a creative brief perhaps, but you really prepare the whole script and the shot list and everything?
Can be sometimes. I mean, those two guys are good examples. So Tom Scott, I would say, in a way, he was probably the most refreshing person I've worked with, because when I turned up, he just had a script. Everything he does is scripted, but almost, except for when he has to react to something. But he researches it, and he writes the script. And I believe his history really is in like broadcast as well, so he's very used to like how that kind of stuff works. And he's a very intelligent guy, you know, so he does his due diligence, and generally his script is pretty spot on. Sometimes he might learn some new facts during the shoot and then make alterations. But, you know, have a little teleprompter on the camera, and he'll
Oh,
He just basically be reading the scripts. That's how he just gets the lines so good. So that was refreshing working with him, because he just turned up and said, yeah, I need shots of this, this, and this. And I was like, say no more. Like, I'll just go and do it. But sometimes, that I work with other talents who, this is no negative comment against themselves, but because they're not camera people, so they're just like, they're there, maybe they want to, as the host, they're doing the experience, but they don't really know how they want it to look or what they need to capture. So they put more of the responsibility onto you as the cameraman, which is fine. I also like doing that because it gives you a little bit more creative freedom. So there are just two different kind of ways to approach it, really. So someone like Tom, he has a very particular style. So again, because I've actually watched his videos for a long time already, I already knew how he shot his videos. And when I work with new people, I try and figure out what it is. And if it's a first time shooting with someone, I'll always ask them. It's like, do you like just simple things like, what frame rate do you want to shoot this in? Do you want me to shoot it in like S-Log color or raw video, or just like slap a LUT on there and have a whatever for your editor? Do you have any requirements like that? Sometimes they'll just be like, I don't know what you're talking about. But usually with YouTubers, because most people on YouTube started out making their own content because they couldn't obviously have their own teams. Most people have had to teach themselves how to use cameras, at least a little bit. Yeah. So most people are pretty familiar with that kind of stuff.
You're a consumer of YouTube, but you've also been behind the scenes creating many of those videos. What kind of changes do you see or trends do you see in the Japan YouTube sphere, so to say? Because it's becoming more and more saturated. There's more and more creators moving here, living here, producing content. And how do people stay original? What are they doing at the moment?
That's a good question, yeah. I mean, of course it's getting more saturated because the people that were already here are still doing what they're doing, and then there's more people coming in, right? So there's less of a pool of ideas to take from. So I guess really the only way that it's being expanded that I can see is just making the scale bigger and bigger and bigger. So some of the bigger guys, because they've got that base, the fan base, they've obviously got the income and the resources to be able to expand productions and stuff. They're able to do crazier things, So maybe an example is with Connor, a Sea-Dog VA. He's part of the Trash Taste crew, and he's been doing this series of like live stream, like road trips. Basically, they rent an RV and then drive across like an area of Japan for 4 or 5 days, and then a bunch of the other YouTube guys come and join, and it's just streamed for like 12 hours a day. Most people can't afford to do that, or have the resources, or even have the energy, to be a live host, on a camera, keeping the chat entertained for all that time.
12 hours.
And in 5 days in a row or whatever, it's pretty intense, So even just as the cameraman, I'm thinking like, I don't know how these guys are doing it, because it's just an hour in, I would be exhausted, like mentally drained, But it takes a very particular type of person to be able to do live streaming, I think. So those two worlds are very different in terms of the creators, the live streaming and the YouTube. Because YouTube, you can just do everything pretty much at your own pace. You can shoot it and you can do multiple takes and you can edit out what you want. But live is live, right? So, you've got to kind of like always got to bring your A game, and like kind of one slip up could end you. It's one of those situations. So
you've been doing this for quite a few years now, and you started from picking up your hobby again to having your first gig for Gaijin Pot, and now working on these larger productions. Was there a moment when you started thinking like, oh, like this is it, I kind of can turn this into a career and work on this full time now?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, again, I feel very lucky to be able to say this, but it was pretty early on, just because I did, the first job, and then I got a bunch of other smaller jobs, and I just found myself like constantly busy. And I did have this thing of where like I was never really booked up more than like a month in advance, and I feel like this has not really changed even until this day after like almost 6 years. The work just comes in like so randomly, and every time I get this small amount of like dread in my brain, thinking like, oh my god, maybe like I'm not going to get booked next week or whatever, then somebody just randomly emails me via like my website perhaps, or like maybe they find me on LinkedIn, or there's a couple of like freelance services that I'm still registered on. I don't really check them that often nowadays, but like I just get random messages from people. So I've kind of learned to just kind of go with the flow and just trust that as far as I'm aware, I haven't made any like critical errors to like defame myself. So as long as you can kind of maintain a good reputation for yourself, I feel like work will always come. And there's always definitely way too much work than, there's way more work than there is like people available to do it. So a lot of my friends are in the same industry. So I've got a lot of friends that are cameramen and editors and just production people doing like fixing, people doing like translations and stuff like that. So whenever I'm not available to do something, I've got like a roster of people that I can call and be like, hey man, are you available to, can I hand you over this? Or are you interested in doing this? And they repay the favor as well. So that's also been a pretty big boon for my business. It's just having a really solid connection and kind of community around you of people that you can kind of rely on.
In the midst of your journey and your different experiences, you co-founded Future Collective. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. So Future Collective is actually a company that kind of existed before I came along, but it existed in kind of slightly a different way. But it's with two business partners they have who are both Hawaiian Japanese. One grew up in Hawaii, one who grew up in Osaka, actually, again, Osaka. But we met due to our connection. And this is a little bit of a dark topic, so I don't know, you might want to cut this, but we actually met due to a project that my business partner started, Daniel, which is basically like suicide prevention and mental health awareness. 2 years ago, I lost somebody fairly close to me, very close to me, due to suicide. And at the time, I reached out to him because I saw this project he had. It's called Tired of Walking. He had it posted on his Facebook group. And to keep a very long story short, the concept is to basically like do this journey of it's like almost like a pilgrimage, like walking around Japan, carrying actually like the shoes of real life suicide victims to kind of like almost like continue their story. And there's a lot of connection to like shoes and suicide in Japan. Is a bit of a kind of a phenomenon that it's kind of a deep story and a bit of a dark thing. I don't really want to get into too much at the moment, but there is this connection there that basically Japan at the moment, we feel, me as an outsider that can see it, and these guys that grew up, half Japanese and, in within the society, Japan is really struggling with mental health at the moment. In one way that they don't really mention it, it just everything gets swept under the rug. And then the other side is that just like the support system is just not there. So anyone that has these kind of feelings and is struggling in any kind of way, there's just no support for them. So this whole journey, kind of this pilgrimage walk, and there would be like a documentary that we film alongside that, and then there'll be other kind of elements to the campaign. It's a very multifaceted, large-scale thing that we're still kind of figuring out how to pull off. But we just bonded over that, kind of shared trauma. We like to joke about it because it's like, I believe that when you've been through like a dark, time in your life, the best way to heal through it is humor. So, we bonded through that. But then during that process, we realized like, actually, we've all got like a lot of stuff quite in common, like those guys are into like marketing, and my other business partner, Sean, he's like a model and an actor. So he spent a lot of time on the camera. He's done like stage shows and stuff. Daniel is into marketing, media creation, and all this kind of stuff, and branding, and I do video production and all that kind of stuff. So as like a trifecta of talents, we kind of covered all bases. So it just seemed like a logical next step for me. I've been looking for some way to kind of like expand my business, but when you're like a lone gunman, just going out for hire on single jobs, you've only got X amount of hours in the day to sell your services, basically. So the only way up is to really scale the business and basically make it larger. But by scaling and creating this company, we are able to take on larger clients, because it just has that more trust. We're a registered Kabushiki Kaisha, which is a proper stock company. And when
whereas as a freelancer, you have a Kojin Jigyo.
Exactly, yeah. So Kojin Jigyo, it's just self-proprietorship, So that's fine. It works for me. But when you approach larger clients about doing like, a multi-month, contracted project, then just the fact that you're an established company holds a lot of weight, Especially in Japan, people take it a lot more serious. The KK, suffix is taken quite seriously.
Kabushiki Kaisha.
Exactly, right. So that kind of thing is what prompted kind of taking it to the next level. But the kind of the branding and the name of Future Collective. So along with those two guys, I co-founded like the new version of it basically. But it kind of existed before that, mostly like in name only, you know. But now we've registered the company. We've kind of started, you know, pursuing a lot of different leads, and there's a lot of exciting things in the.
So what kind of bigger projects have you had the opportunity to work on, like as a company with your partners?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's certain things we can't obviously divulge. Probably the biggest thing that we've been able to work on so far is we did a very big influencer campaign last year with TikTok Japan, where we sent 7 influencers to Hawaii, to Waikiki, and we partnered with Zip Air. We partnered with the Alohilani Resort, which is one of the best resorts on the Waikiki beachfront, and the Twin Fin Hotel, and then a bunch of like restaurants and shops and stuff like that. And basically like wined, dined them, took them around on like tours, went swimming with turtles and all this kind of stuff. Those brand partners kind of like funded the project, and then to kind of like propagate all of the whole campaign, we also partnered with TikTok Japan. So this was their first ever international campaign, and by the end of it, it was actually turned out to be their most successful campaign ever in terms of like numbers. So all of the influencers that were on the trip, they were making content about the trip, you know, like, oh, we're in Hawaii, you know, we're doing X, Y, and Z, and then, you know, we kind of stacked all that stuff up, and then we released it over a course of 6 weeks. And yeah, just by, you know, kind of merging the power of many influencers together, we were basically able to amplify the effect of this campaign. So yeah, I'd say that was probably the biggest thing that we've worked on.
I'm actually curious, when you work with like large companies like TikTok Japan, I'm sure they have very long, detailed contracts and list of requirements, and this is how we want things done. Is there anything that really surprised you a little bit? Like, oh, really, this is part of we have to do it this way, whether it's shooting a video, whether it's like the conditions that they're setting? That's
a good question. I wasn't involved so much with the contract for TikTok. That's generally not my role in the company to go over the small print. But from what I'm aware, the contract was fairly dense. But they're a bit of a tricky one because you know, ByteDance, the parent company, who's Chinese, and China has its whole other set of regulations and, you know, restrictions, you could say. But then, you know, you factor in the Japanese side of it, and their restrictions. Ultimately, there wasn't really anything, you know, too bad. There's nothing really surprising, I would say. I guess if you ever come across anything like that, it might just be more down to like, you know, like a conflict of interest. So they might just say like, you can't work with a particular sponsor because they also have a social platform that you know,
basically straightforward things that you'd find also.
Exactly, yeah. But because we were working with like airlines, restaurants, and whatever, you know, and all of these companies, they have their own TikTok accounts, you know. So for TikTok, it's good because, you know, they could basically kind of like artificially boost the visibility of certain posts on certain accounts, and that's kind of like how they help you behind the scenes. It's like they ask, you know, when does the campaign start, when does it end, and then any post with a certain hashtag will be boosted kind of by the algorithm and pushed.
Oh, because they control the platform.
Exactly. They So what they give you in terms of support is kind of like ad spend, basically. So they give you like a kind of virtual credit to you know, basically fund.
You said that you kind of joined Future Collective with the intention of taking on larger projects and so on, and TikTok is a fairly big client. But if it's up to you, what kind of projects would you like to work on now that you've already kind of done so many diverse things in your portfolio?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know whether this would be my own thing or with Future Collective. I'm not really sure, but like, I'd really love to just like direct something big myself. Direct or be the director of photography of. I've always mainly been into like documentaries, basically. So I grew up watching a lot of like David Attenborough stuff and all that kind of, I guess, anything to do with like animals or science or just the world.
Which you've done, right? You worked with BBC Earth.
I have as well. Yeah, I've done that. Yeah. So that was cool. That was with a Canadian company actually called Blue Ant Media, and they were producing a show about Arctic animals, And one of the animals they wanted to feature is the very famous the snow monkeys from Nagano in Japan that go into the onsen. But this was in the height of COVID, and I don't want to say this in a kind of in a dark way, but COVID actually benefited me quite a lot in the sense that because nobody could come into Japan, I got a lot of requests from people outside of Japan wanting me to go and film stuff. So this was one of those times they were like, yeah, we've got a crew that could come over, but we can't. And
the borders are
yeah, but once I started talking to them, they were actually like, well, to be honest, actually, you're already there, so it's way cheaper for us to hire you anyway. Send you there for a few days, film the content, and then send us the footage. So that's basically how that came about. But that show was commissioned by BBC Earth and produced by Blue Ant, basically. But I believe that was shot like in several locations across the world. There were a couple of animals that are in Canada where Blue Ant's from. But I think they had to send someone to like Iceland to shoot something with like polar bears or something like that, or maybe like a snow fox or something. And then I did the Japan stuff. But I have a lot of those kind of jobs where I'm just like, I'm the guy on the ground. And I really like that, to be honest, because it feeds very well into my business model of just, like kind of, I don't know, I don't really have to pursue the work too much. I just kind of, I guess when people are searching for somebody like me, I guess my name comes up, or because I get a lot of contact through my website and stuff, so that works out really well. Yeah.
Your original interest in Japan, you said, was the music from the game Goemon, and kind of that really clicked with you, and you studied music. Mm-hmm. And when we were exchanging a little bit before by message, you told me that you actually started playing some traditional Japanese instruments, like the Shamisen and the koto. Mm-hmm. To switch completely the topic, can you talk to me a little bit about Shamisen and koto? What kind of instruments are they? And how did you really get started with those? Is it difficult to learn?
Mm-hmm. Well, just for a little bit of context, I've been playing shamisen for almost 6 years, so about the time that I came here actually, but koto I only started over a year ago. So I have a lot less experience in koto, and I'm very much a beginner still. Because I'm kind of, my education at university was guitar as well, that translates a lot more over to shamisen. So if anyone that doesn't know what a shamisen is, it's basically a guitar-shaped instrument. It only has 3 strings. So shami is basically 3 in Japanese, and then sen is like the string, right? Mm-hmm. But it can also be called a sangin, so san, gin, 3 strings. And the koto is like kind of a long harp. It's basically like a plank of wood with like strings drawn across it. A typical one has 13 strings, but there's also a 17 string like bass version.
That's a lot of strings.
Yeah. So that's called a jushichigin, so 17 string koto. But the strings are much heavier on those. So usually like when you play accompaniment, not accompaniment parts, but you just play like pieces that have several kotos at the same time. You'll generally play like the lower like bass parts on the jushichigin koto. But I got into it, like I say, via my interest in that game, and subsequently through my life there were other like Japanese games. Another one in particular, Okami, which is a very cool game. It's on the PlayStation 2, and the art style is like ukiyo-e, kind of brush painting and stuff, so visually very interesting. But the music for that game was really cool. So there's loads of Japanese games, that feature those kind of instruments. But when I've moved here, I just thought like, I might try and see if I can do it, like do like an experience or something like that. So I did a bit of research. I found my sensei who lives in Saitama, just north of Tokyo. And I went to her house. I had a trial lesson and stuff, and I found I picked up the basics of shamisen fairly quickly. She actually has these 2 like beginner books. Each one's like 20 pages long. I actually went through the first book in the first lesson. So she was like, "Oh, okay, you
know some music."
Yeah, you're a musician, right? And I don't say that to brag, but I just mean because it's so similar to guitar in a lot of ways that just the general, the coordination it requires between 2 hands. I already have those kind of like muscle memory links there, so that was much easier. But in a lot of other regards, it's very, very different to guitar. So one thing is like when you play, if I was playing the guitar like now, I would just be sitting exactly how I'm sitting. It'd be like just leaning back, just doing something. But when you play shamisen, you have to sit as if you are performing, and you have to like sit up back straight, and you kind of hold it like this. So the arm is like floating out. There's a lot of space
So
here.
there's a very specific position of holding.
And again, it's very Japanese. You have to, like, it's all about the imagery as well. So even if you're playing perfectly, but if you're like slouched over and stuff, it's not very proper, right? So it's like that. And then the way that you hold the big plectrum is called a bachi. It's very heavy and it's very big and cumbersome. But you put your wrist kind of like on the body of the shamisen, and your hand goes like down like this. It kind of hangs down. So it's very like uncomfortable, this. At least at the beginning, your wrist is like a 90-degree angle. It just feels very bizarre, when you start doing that.
Not natural like the guitar where you would just flow with.
Exactly, yeah. So it's very loose with the guitar, and other things. There are so many minute differences that I guess you only really notice when it's like if you have experience playing an instrument like that, like the guitar, because it's so free. Like because you have to hold this posture, you can't like nod your head to the beat or whatever. So like when you're playing shamisen, it's just like very rigid. And it feels strange, but like that's just the traditional way to do it, right? But because I've been playing guitar for over 20 years, to not move my body in time to the music is like, it's like painfully hard.
Difficult.
Yeah. Whereas like if a beginner was to learn shamisen with no experience of other instruments, they're actually at an advantage because they don't have that muscle memory. So things like this, the way that you finger on the fretboard on a guitar, generally the best technique is to keep your finger very flat to the board. But with a shamisen, you actually press the string with your nail like this.
Oh.
So if you can see like the difference between this and this, it's almost like two completely opposite things that you can do with your finger, right? Flat or completely curled. And also pressing down with your nail is kind of painful at first. So I don't know if you can see there's a bit of a dent in my nail there, because they actually call this the itomichi, so the string path. One of my sensei's nail is like really like dug in because she plays like a lot, like every day. So there's those kinds of things.
The instrument itself, I mean, guitar is super diverse. You can do heavy metal, rock, country, folk, and you can have it in jazz and all kinds of genres. Where do you hear shamisen nowadays? If you
I mean, it's becoming a lot more popular in pop music and rock music. I don't know if you've heard, for example, there's a band called Wagaki Band.
Oh, I think they have this very famous song, Shamisen
Zenbon Sakura, which is probably the din 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 din
Yeah,
din
that's
din
that
din.
one.
He did this one, right? But they've got loads of songs. But basically it's for anyone that doesn't know, wagaki is basically just the Japanese word for Japanese instruments. So they're called the Japanese Instrument Band. And the main singer and kind of instrumentalist of the band is a shamisen player. And they also have an electric guitar, drums, a bass. I think there's a shakuhachi flute player, but I don't know if he's like permanently in the band. I think he is. I think they also have like a taiko drummer as well. So they basically just have like all the different Japanese instruments mixed with a rock band. It's really, really cool. And it just sounds like anime music, basically. But that's kind of one place that you hear it. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is with shamisen, there's actually, I guess, 4 different types. So the one that you hear in Wagaki Band and most popular is called Tsugaru, which is from the Tsugaru region up in Aomori in northern Honshu. And then what I study is called Jiuta, which basically is like folk music. So it's kind of like traditional songs. There's also like singing and stuff. There's minyo, which is also, minyo just means folk songs. They're a bit more stripped down. Jiuta can be a bit more developed, and like sometimes you can have like Jiuta versions of like Western songs, or like classical music like translated onto Japanese instruments. And then you've got like Nagauta, which is the stuff that they generally play in accompaniment to kabuki theatre. So it's a lot more stripped back. It's more like background music, basically. And although most shamisen, they look the same if you just look at them, but there's actually kind of 3 types. And what differentiates them is the thickness of the neck. So you have a hoso zao. Sao is the name for neck.
Okay.
And you have hoso, which is thin, chu, middle, and futo, fat. So the hoso zao is used for nagauta, chu zao is used for jiuta and minyo, and then the futo zao is, because it's big, thick, and durable, a bit more like heavy duty. It's used for the sugaru, and the sugaru is a bit more like bombastic. And you, when you see someone playing a sugaru, it's very percussive,
Heavy,
and it sounds very like almost like a drum, right? So the styles are really, really different as well. But before I started learning, I didn't know any of this stuff. So I found that very interesting as well.
Having received like professional music education back in the UK, and now kind of starting from scratch and receiving professional music education in Japan from a private teacher for traditional instrument, what is it like? Do you feel like the way of teaching how to play an instrument, how to listen to music, how to play it is different than what you've learned back in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, learning, I guess because it's not like in a formal institution setting. I just go for private lessons, and my sensei, she's a beautiful lady. She's so lovely, but she's so good at what she does, you know. So it's always kind of just like, I mean, always constantly in awe of like, you know, her ability, because she's what we would call a daishihan, or a grandmaster of shamisen and koto, and then she has students under her that are classed as like masters, and then under that you have like just the regular students. So she's been playing for 40 or almost 50 years, I believe. So in that sense, I never really studied with somebody that I guess I respected so much. It's not like in a university, the teachers are more like university teachers, you know, and you just study things about your music business or whatever. So in that way, it's different, and the way that for her, it's like her life, you know. She just takes it very seriously, and I really respect that. And when I learned guitar as a teenager, it's just like, I got into like Green Day, and I heard him doing like a pick scrape with the, you know, I was like, I want to make that noise kind of thing. So I asked my parents to buy me a guitar, and then I just like fiddle around and figured it all out myself. So I basically got completely self-taught guitar. But for shamisen, because it's so nuanced, because it's so cultural, I don't think you can learn it on your own. Or if you do learn it, you'll learn it wrong. So for example, like when you learn certain songs that have, some songs are instrumental, but some have lyrics, and it's very like archaic Japanese. So even if you speak perfect Japanese, it's quite hard to understand. So you have to like kind of study the lyrics and understand what they mean. There's a song I've been learning recently called Togiruta. Kinuta is the name of a big stone that they would use to dry kimono. So you would like wash them in the river, and then you'd basically like beat the kimono against this giant rock, and it would make this like slapping sound. And to is like togi, like far away, right? So the song is about the sound of these toginuta.
So when you back down in the village and you hear them
exactly, just the sound of these kimono being beaten against rocks, like kind of like echoing across the mountains. So it sounds very Japanese, right? So it's all about describing these peaceful scenes. You know, the songs about like, you know, the rays of light coming through the canopy of a forest and all these kind of things, right? But they're more like poems, honestly, than songs. But you kind of have to really appreciate the nuances in how they're played. You have to understand the lyrics as well, because there's certain parts of the song where they have a certain meaning, and you have to give them that dynamic. And
culturally, it's very hard to understand if you don't have the context, right? If you don't have the background, you need that education as well.
Exactly, yeah. And like I say, you know, you pick up you get the music score, and the lyrics will be written there, but because it's such old Japanese, it's just a bunch of words I've never said before or I've never heard. So, you know, my sensei can then tell me like, oh, this means this. And I'm like, oh, well, I know that word. And it turns out like I know alternate words for 90% of these things already, but because it's like people studying Shakespeare basically. Like, but even as an English person, I can't really read Shakespeare because I never studied it, right? So in daily life, in the modern day, we don't use that language. So
you said you had a trial lesson to kind of see if that's a fit. Can anyone start playing shamisen if they want to see your sensei, for example, or is
Absolutely,
it more like
yeah. So her name is Nakagawa. If you search Nakagawa shamisen or Nakagawa koto in Tokyo, she's on. I forgot what her website is, but you'll find her. I believe she's the only English-speaking sensei as well.
So I can imagine there's not that many shamisen teachers, especially English speakers.
Yeah.
Within Japan.
Yeah. Maybe not the only, but they're quite rare, you know, because it's already a rare profession anyway to be like a professional grandmaster of a shamisen and koto. So I mean, now we pretty much converse in Japanese, but at the time when I moved here, I didn't speak any Japanese or very little. So I actively sought out, should I say, an English-speaking person at the time. But regardless of that, I believe I made the right choice because she's just a very nice person as well. I think she's a good teacher, It's a really good community as well. It's something I always say to people who are struggling to make friends in Japan is just start an activity, join a club, or just find a reason to get out of the house and do something. So via this, I've met a lot of people in my group that are doing, obviously that we're doing all the same thing, and we do concerts and we do like ensemble performances. So other than my one-on-one lessons, we have big group practices and stuff. So that's a good chance to catch up with everybody and make connections.
You came here a little over 6 years ago to kind of be with your wife and start a new career in a way. Went through music to video production, kept music on the side. Looking back, you feel that you found your place here in Japan?
Absolutely, yeah, I really do. I mean, my wife actually, or my friends as well, my Japanese friends, they always joke that I'm more Japanese than they are, and I'd never say that myself because I think it's I don't know, it's a little bit cringy when people try and be Japanese when they're not, and I don't think I am. But I think one part of it is I think just British people are very similar to Japanese people in a lot of ways. We're very just passive aggressive, and we love drinking tea, and we say sorry too much and stuff like that, and I don't know, we kind of bottle up our feelings, all these kind of things for better or worse. We tend to be quite similar, but just me personally, I'm just a very I'm not an introvert, but I'm a very quiet person a lot of the times, and I feel like when you're in Japan, people just don't bother you, so I kind of just like it here because it's just easy to get along. And I feel like if you make the effort to assimilate and you learn the culture or things, it doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. There's lots of things about living in Japan that I think, this could be done better, or this doesn't really align with my personal beliefs. But as long as you just accept that, that's just the way that it is, then I think you'll be okay. Yeah.
And so in the coming years, we can expect maybe some more music performances and some more cool videos, and perhaps a large project directed by Julian Domanski.
That might be very, very far in the future, but
who knows? 6 years ago, you were just starting out, and here you are. You're making.
That's a very good point. Yeah. So
time flies very fast.
Yeah. Maybe sometimes I'm too humble. I don't know. I feel awkward saying that. I'm going to do big things. I just try my best, and if it happens, then it happens.
We'll look out for them. Thank you for making time today to come talk to us here in Osaka, in your busy schedule.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you everyone for listening and watching to this episode. This was Unpacking Japan, and we'll be back again next week. Bye. Are you looking for another podcast episode to listen to next? If you like the one you just listened to, I'm sure you'll also enjoy the one that I've selected and linked in the description down below. Go check it out.